passage for today that we're looking at is John 10, verses 1 through 18. This is a well-known and well-loved passage in which Jesus says to us, I am the Good Shepherd. You know, this image of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, it has a deep hold on Christian imagination. And in fact, we see the image of the shepherd woven throughout the entire Bible. Much of Israel, especially southern Israel known as Judea, much of it is rough and stony, land that's hard to farm. And so the culture that developed in Israel, and especially around Jerusalem, was more pastoral than agricultural. And so a central figure of the community was the shepherd. The life of a shepherd, as we can imagine, was not easy. With little grass, the sheep were constantly wandering, and with prey, such as wild animals, not to mention thieves and robbers, the shepherd had to be on guard, protecting the flock. The shepherd was almost always on duty, and the shepherd therefore sacrificed much. As one writer puts it, constant vigilance, fearless courage, and patient love for his flock, these were the necessary characteristics of the shepherd. Now, in the Old Testament, God is commonly pictured as the shepherd of his people. That's important. God is the shepherd. You find this all throughout the Psalms. Great example, Psalm 23, which we all know. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want." But you also find the imagery of God as shepherd throughout the prophets. Isaiah writes, and this is Isaiah 40, verse 11, God will feed his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs in his arm. And so what you have here is this metaphor of God as a shepherd passing into the New Testament, with Jesus becoming the Good Shepherd. Jesus is the one who will risk his life to save the one straying sheep. Jesus will have pity on the people who are like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus is the shepherd of the souls of men, as 1 Peter says. And so we cannot miss the claim being made in our passage. And that is that Jesus is the fulfillment of God's promises to God's people that we find in the Old Testament. Right? Jesus is the Good Shepherd that God has promised his people. Jesus is identifying himself with God. And this becomes even more clear when Jesus says, I am the Good Shepherd. Here we have another I am statement in the Gospel of John.
This image of Jesus as the Good Shepherd is such a powerful metaphor. And we can forget to notice the second claim Jesus makes, a second I am statement. In verse 7, Jesus says, I am the gate. Or as some translations put it, I am the door. In the towns and villages of Israel, there were two types of pens or enclosures for sheep. If you lived in a village, there was a communal sheep pen where all the flocks were sheltered at night. The shepherds would come in from the fields, and all the sheep would be grouped together in this shared pen. These pens were protected by a strong door and a gatekeeper. This is the type of sheep pen that Jesus refers to in verses 2 and 3. The shepherd would come in the morning, the gatekeeper would recognize him, open the door, and the shepherd would call out to his sheep. And the sheep would follow him because they knew the shepherd's voice. Just like your dog might know your voice rather than the voice of a stranger. But in verse 7, when Jesus says, I am the gate, he's referring to a different type of sheep pen. When the sheep were out in the hills in the warmer months, they would often stay out at night so that the shepherd did not have to bring them back to the village. And instead of gathering his sheep in the village's sheep pen, the shepherd would utilize a more temporary enclosure. This was normally just an open space enclosed by a wall. And in the wall there was an entrance through which the sheep would come in and go out. But there was no physical gate like the pen in the village. Instead, at night, the shepherd would lay down across the opening, forming the gate himself. That's a beautiful image of who Jesus is, and a profound claim. Jesus is saying, I have come to show you who God is like. But more than that, I have come to open the way to Him. I am the gate that gives you access to God. I am your entrance to life with God.
So, two I am statements in our passage today. I am the good shepherd, and I am the gate. And here's something to see about these self-descriptions of Jesus. They are both intensely relational. What I mean by that is both statements have no meaning without the presence of the sheep. These I am statements, they don't simply reveal who Jesus is, but more specifically, they reveal who Jesus is in relationship to those who follow Him. The identity of Jesus and the identity of the community that gather around Him are linked. And so what do these statements tell us about the community that follows Jesus? Well, Jesus says in verses 14 and 15, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. The community that gathers around Jesus are the ones who share in the mutual knowledge of God in Jesus, whose relationship to Jesus is modeled on Jesus' relationship to God. Listening to Jesus' voice is the source of unity of this community. And we're told that by listening to Jesus and receiving Jesus as the point of access to God, that the community receives the abundant life that Jesus promises us.
Lastly, it's important to say that the community that gathers around Jesus receives its identity through Jesus' gift of His life for them. To be a member of Jesus' flock is to be among those for whom Jesus is willing to die. The death of Jesus holds together these two metaphors from John 10. I am the good shepherd, and I am the gate. In Jesus' death, which is freely chosen by Him, Jesus reveals His love for us, like a good shepherd. And at the same time, He opens the way of life for us, just like the gate.